Welcome back to Niko's Perioperative, because staying curious makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that's, I think, pretty close to every anesthesiologist's heart.
Yeah.
Acute kidney injury.
AKI.
Or AKI.
Yeah.
And we've got a mountain of research to unpack here.
We do.
Spanning a whole decade of discovery.
A whole decade.
Since those game-changing KDIGO guidelines dropped back in 2012.
Yeah, those guidelines were a watershed moment, I think, for the field.
Totally.
Pulling together insights from over 18,000 studies to provide a roadmap for diagnosing and managing AKI.
It was like getting a brand new playbook, right?
Yeah.
But in the world of medicine, the game never stops evolving.
Never.
So what's changed in the last decade?
Oh, so much has changed.
Yeah.
The field has just exploded with new research.
Really?
Think back to 2012.
Okay.
We were largely relying on creatinine and urine output
Right.
to assess kidney function.
Right.
Now we've got these incredible tools called biomarkers. That can give us a much earlier and more detailed picture of what's happening at a cellular level.
Okay. So let's break this down for our fellow anesthesiologists.
Yeah.
What exactly are these biomarkers?
Oh.
And how do they work their magic?
Imagine your patient's kidneys as like a complex city with different neighborhoods.
Okay.
Biomarkers are like those little traffic helicopters,
Yeah.
giving us real-time reports on congestion and disruptions.
I like that.
They're substances released by different parts of the kidney when there's injury or stress.
Okay.
Some signal trouble in the filtering units, while others point to issues with the hypes.
So instead of waiting for a major traffic jam,
Right.
the equivalent of a big creatinine jump,
Exactly.
we can spot smaller incidents early on and maybe even prevent them from becoming major pileups.
Precisely.
Wow.
And this is where it gets really exciting.
Okay.
We can now detect what's called subclinical AKI,
Subclinical.
kidney injury that's brewing under the surface even before those classic signs show up.
So this has huge implications, I think, for our work in the perioperative setting,
Huge.
right?
Yeah.
We're often dealing with patients who are already at higher risk for AKI due to things like major surgery, fluid shifts,
For sure.
and potential exposure to nephrotoxic medications.
Absolutely.
So early detection with biomarkers could be a game changer.
Could be a game changer.
It allows us to tailor our anesthetic and fluid management strategies to protect those vulnerable kidneys
Yes.
and hopefully improve patient outcomes.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about catching AKI sooner, but also about personalizing care
Yes.
and maybe even preventing it in the first place.
And preventing it.
This all sounds really promising.
It is.
But I'm wondering, has this translated into concrete changes in how we manage AKI in the operating room?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
One of the most hotly debated areas is fluid management.
Okay.
The 2012 KDIGO guidelines nudged us towards crystalloids over colloids,
Right.
but called for more research to compare different types of fluids.
I bet researchers jumped right on that.
Oh, they did.
What have we learned since then?
We've seen a whirlwind of studies
Okay.
with sometimes conflicting results.
Such as research.
Yeah. For example, the SALTED and SMART trials initially hinted that balanced crystalloids might be superior to saline solution in preventing AKI. However, later studies like BASICS and PLIBUS didn't quite back that up.
So the great debate continues.
It continues.
Balanced versus saline.
It's not so simple.
Which one wins?
The conversation has expanded beyond just the type of fluid to include the optimal volume.
The volume.
Too little fluid or hypovolemia starves those kidneys.
Right.
Too much hypervolemia can overload them.
Right.
Neither is good.
Sounds like we need to find that Goldilocks zone.
The Goldilocks zone.
Just the right amount.
Just the right amount.
Any clear guidance on that front?
Unfortunately, the research is a bit of a mixed bag here, too.
Okay.
The RELIEF trial threw us a curveball.
Okay.
Finding a higher risk of AKI with restrictive fluid strategies. But then trials like Classic and Clovers haven't shown harm with that approach.
Okay, so a lot of back and forth in the research world.
There is.
What's the takeaway for anesthesiologists on the front lines?
Yeah.
How do we make sense of all this when we're making real-time decisions for our patients?
It's about moving away from rigid protocols and embracing the art of individualized care.
Okay.
We need to carefully consider each patient's unique situation,
Right.
their underlying conditions, the type of surgery they're undergoing, their hemodynamic status, and make the most informed decision we can based on the best available evidence.
So it's like each patient presents a unique puzzle that we need to solve.
A unique puzzle.
And speaking of puzzles, the KDIGO guidelines also touch on hemodynamic management.
Yes.
Things like blood pressure targets and vasoconstrictors.
Yes.
Any new developments in that arena?
Definitely.
Oh.
The 2012 guidelines suggested aiming for a mean arterial pressure between 65 and 90 mmHg, but they acknowledged the need for more research to refine that target. We've seen trials like Sepsis PAM that didn't show a clear advantage of one specific blood pressure target over another in patients with septic shock.
So again, it's not about blindly hitting a number on the monitor, but understanding the individual patient's physiology,
Right.
and how they're responding to our interventions.
Exactly.
Now, before we go any further, I want to address something that often comes up when we're talking about AKI management.
Okay.
The myths.
The myths.
And misconceptions that have lingered over the years.
Yes, you know.
Those persistent myths that refuse to die.
Right. It's time to do some myth busting.
It is time.
Let's hear it. I'm all ears.
All right, let's start with the classic.
Okay.
Low-dose dopamine, sometimes called renal dopamine, improves renal blood flow and protects against AKI.
Oh, I remember learning about that in medical school.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the evidence doesn't really hold up.
You're right.
Okay.
Large clinical trials and meta-analyses have thoroughly debunked this myth,
Wow.
showing no real benefit and even some potential cardiovascular risks. So renal dopamine is out the window.
Based on the current evidence, yes.
Okay.
Now, how about this one?
Okay.
Routine diuretic use can magically transform oliguric AKI,
Okay.
where urine output is low,
Right.
into non-oliguric AKI and improve outcomes.
That one seems logical at first glance.
It does.
More urine output equals happy kidneys, right?
Well, not quite.
Oh.
While diuretics might increase urine output, they haven't been shown to improve kidney function or reduce the need for dialysis.
Oh, wow.
Plus, they can sometimes backfire by causing electrolyte imbalances and dehydration.
Another myth bites the dust.
Another one bites the dust.
All right, what else do we have on our list?
Let's tackle this one.
Okay.
Phenoldiprem is a superhero nephroprotective agent.
Okay, that one's new to me.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Phenoldiprem is a medication that acts on dopamine receptors in the kidney. And it was thought to have these magical protective effects.
Okay.
Unfortunately, controlled studies haven't shown any significant reduction in AKI or improvement in kidney outcomes.
So another treatment that didn't quite live up to the hype.
Exactly.
Gotcha. But we're not done yet.
No, we're not.
Here's another myth that often pops up, especially, I think, in our field.
Yes.
N-acetylcysteine and bicarbonate are the dynamic duo
The dynamic duo.
that can prevent contrast-induced AKI.
Yes.
Contrast-induced AKI. That's definitely a concern we deal with all of the time.
All the time.
What's the verdict on these preventative measures?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The landmark PRESERVE trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, demonstrated that bicarbonate offered no advantage over simple saline in preventing contrast-induced AKI.
Wow.
And N-acetylcysteine, its role is also being questioned.
So are we moving away from these traditional strategies?
It seems that way, at least based on the latest evidence.
Okay.
And finally, let's address a common misconception.
Okay.
Any medication that causes a creatinine increase is automatically a villain,
Okay.
a nephrotoxic agent.
That one seems straightforward.
It does.
Creatinine goes up. Kidneys are in trouble.
Not always.
Oh, really?
We're learning that some medications can safely be used despite causing changes in creatinine, as long as we understand how they work and monitor patients carefully.
So it's about looking beyond a single lab value and considering the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
It's about understanding the nuances of each medication, each patient, and not oversimplifying things.
Exactly.
It's a great reminder that we can't just rely on rote memorization or outdated dogma.
Absolutely.
We have to stay curious
Be curious.
and critically evaluate the evidence as it evolves.
Exactly.
And in speaking of evolution, I think it's time we shift gears and delve into the future of AKI care.
Yes. Let's look ahead and see what the next decade might hold.
All right, I'm excited.
The future of AKI care is brimming with possibilities.
I like possibilities.
One area ripe for exploration is understanding the different trajectories of AKI.
Okay.
We need to get better at distinguishing between persistent and transient AKI, as well as recurrent versus recovered AKI.
So we need to move beyond just focusing on the acute phase.
Yeah.
And think about the long-term consequences.
Precisely. And remember those biomarkers we were talking about?
Yeah.
They're going to be key players in this.
Okay.
We need to integrate them into our diagnostic criteria and develop new risk assessment tools.
Okay.
This way we can identify those patients who are most likely to head down the path toward chronic kidney disease.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, we've spent quite a bit of time discussing the controversies surrounding fluid management and hemodynamics.
Yeah.
It seems like there's still a lot of uncertainty in those areas.
For sure.
Where do we go from here?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
We need more research to nail down the optimal hemodynamic management for AKI patients.
Okay.
What are the ideal blood pressure targets?
Right.
Which vasoconstrictor should we be using?
Right.
And do these strategies need to be tailored for different patient populations, like those with chronic hypertension?
Okay.
These are all questions that need answers.
Yeah, these are really important questions. And what about renal replacement therapy?
Yeah.
When should we initiate it?
Right.
And are there ways to personalize it for each patient?
That's another crucial area for future research.
Okay.
The 2012 KDIGO guidelines recommended starting renal replacement therapy when life-threatening complications of AKI rear their ugly heads.
Okay.
But they emphasized that the decision shouldn't be based solely on creatinine and urea levels.
Right.
Since then, we've seen trials comparing early versus late initiation of renal replacement therapy, but the results have been a bit mixed.
So it's not as straightforward as just looking at a lab value and saying, okay, time to start dialysis.
Not at all.
Okay.
It's about carefully evaluating each patient.
Right.
Understanding the specific complications they're experiencing and how AKI is impacting their overall clinical picture.
It seems like this theme of individualized care keeps coming up again and again.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that each patient is unique
For sure.
and requires a tailored approach.
You're spot on. It's about moving away from those rigid protocols and embracing the complexity of each patient's situation.
And this is where ongoing research and education becomes so critical, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We need to stay on top of the latest findings and share that knowledge with each other.
We as healthcare providers need to stay curious, keep learning, and be open to challenging our assumptions.
Yeah.
The landscape of AKI management is constantly shifting, and the only way to provide the best possible care for our patients is to stay ahead of the curve.
It's truly amazing how much our understanding of AKI has grown in just a decade.
It is.
But it's clear that this is just the beginning.
It is.
There's still so much to discover and explore.
Absolutely.
One thing that's really struck me throughout this deep dive
Yeah.
is the incredible potential of biomarkers in AKI management.
They're incredible.
It feels like they have the power to completely revolutionize how we approach this condition,
Yeah.
both in the perioperative setting and beyond.
You've hit the nail on the head. Biomarkers are like having a window into the inner workings of the kidney.
Right.
They provide information that was simply unimaginable just a few years ago.
Can you give us some specific examples of how these biomarkers are being used?
Sure.
Or could be used in clinical practice?
Let's start with the assessment of renal functional reserve.
Okay.
This refers to the kidney's ability to ramp up its filtration rate when faced with a challenge like surgery.
Okay.
Research has shown that patients with limited renal functional reserve are at a much higher risk of developing AKI after procedures like cardiac surgery.
Interesting.
By measuring certain biomarkers, we can identify these vulnerable patients ahead of time and take steps to protect their kidneys.
So it's about shifting from a reactive approach to a proactive one.
Exactly. And it's not just about risk assessment. Biomarkers can also help us pinpoint the root cause of AKI.
Okay.
For instance, some biomarkers can differentiate between AKI caused by ischemia, which is a lack of blood flow to the kidney, and AKI caused by direct toxicity from medications. This information can guide our treatment decisions and potentially lead to better outcomes.
I can see how this would be incredibly valuable for anesthesiologists who often have to make quick decisions about medications and fluid management during surgery.
Absolutely.
Right.
In the perioperative setting, time is of the essence.
Yeah.
Biomarkers can provide us with rapid insights into kidney health, allowing us to make adjustments in real time to minimize the risk of AKI.
This is really fascinating stuff.
It is.
It feels like we're on the verge of a new era in AKI management,
Yeah.
where personalized care and precision medicine become the norm.
I couldn't agree more. And it's all thanks to the incredible work of researchers who are constantly pushing the boundaries of knowledge and developing new tools to help us diagnose, treat, and prevent AKI.
And of course, to podcasts like ours that help spread the word and get this valuable information into the hands of healthcare providers.
Absolutely.
But before we get too carried away with ourselves,
Okay.
I want to circle back to the elephant in the room, the ongoing debate about fluid management in AKI.
Ah, yes. The great crystalloid versus colloid restrictive versus liberal fluid debate.
It seems like every new study adds another layer of complexity.
It does.
For our listeners who might not be as familiar with the intricacies of this debate, can you give us a brief overview of the key controversies and what the evidence currently tells us?
Sure. Let's start with the type of fluid.
Okay.
As we mentioned earlier, the 2012 KDIGO guidelines recommended crystalloids, which are essentially salt solutions over colloids, which are larger molecules like albumin.
Right.
But they didn't specify which type of crystalloid was best.
Okay.
Since then, there's been a flurry of research comparing balanced crystalloids, which are designed to more closely mimic the composition of our blood plasma, to normal saline, which is a simpler solution.
Right.
Some early studies hinted that balanced crystalloids might be superior in preventing AKI, but later studies haven't been able to consistently confirm this.
So the jury's still out on balance versus saline.
It is. And to make things even more complicated, we also have the question of how much fluid to give.
Right.
On one hand, we know that skimping on fluids can lead to hypovolemia and make kidney injury worse.
Right.
But on the other hand, flooding patients with fluids can lead to hypervolemia, which can also put a strain on the kidneys.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance, right?
Exactly. But the optimal fluid strategy likely varies depending on the individual patient and the clinical scenario.
Okay.
Some patients might benefit from a more conservative, restrictive approach, while others might need more liberal fluid administration.
And how do we determine which approach is best for a given patient?
Well, that's where careful clinical judgment and monitoring come into play.
Okay.
We need to assess the patient's volume, status, urine output, hemodynamics, and their overall clinical picture to make informed decisions about fluid management.
It sounds like a lot of responsibility rests on the shoulders of healthcare providers.
It does.
Especially anesthesiologists, who are often at the forefront of fluid management in the perioperative period.
It is a significant responsibility,
Right.
but it's also a privilege.
Okay.
We have the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of our patients by staying informed, applying the latest evidence, and advocating for their best interests.
Well said.
Yeah.
And I think this really highlights the importance of ongoing education and knowledge sharing, which is exactly what we aim to do here on Niko's Perioperative.
For sure.
So before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay.
With all the advancements we've discussed, how can we translate this knowledge into concrete actions to improve AKI care in our own practice settings?
That's an excellent question. And I would encourage each listener to reflect on their own practice and identify areas where they can integrate the latest evidence into their decision-making.
Okay.
Perhaps it's adopting a more individualized approach to fluid management, incorporating biomarkers into your risk assessment, or advocating for earlier referral for renal replacement therapy when indicated.
It's about empowering ourselves and our colleagues to be agents of change in the fight against AKI.
Absolutely. Even small changes can make a big impact.
Right.
And ultimately lead to better care for our patients.
It all comes down to this. We need to be proactive, informed, and always advocating for our patients' kidney health. But even beyond specific interventions, there's a fundamental mindset we need to cultivate.
You're talking about staying curious.
Right, exactly. Never stop questioning, challenging the status quo, and seeking out new knowledge. That's what drives progress.
Yeah.
Especially in a field as complex and ever-evolving as AKI management.
I couldn't agree more. Curiosity is the engine of innovation in medicine.
Yeah.
It's what pushes us to find better answers, develop new tools, and ultimately provide the best possible care for our patients.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of AKI. We hope you found this exploration insightful and maybe even sparked a few new questions in your own mind.
Remember, the quest for knowledge never ends. Stay curious.
And keep making a difference.